Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all right. Things are getting a little uncertain, aren't they, for us, all round us, but we're still here, and that's the most important thing, and hopefully will be for the foreseeable future. Just one thing, next week's Wednesday talk, will actually be the recording of Father Terry's funeral liturgies. They will in fact be available from Tuesday evening, but all through Wednesday. So the Wednesday talk will be Father Terry's funeral liturgies. I thought it would be a nice way for you to be able to join in with that prayer for him on that occasion. So that'll just be for next week only. At the beginning of this process, the Prime Minister came out with a statement, "We're all in this together," which, as things have turned out, couldn't be further from the truth. We are not all in this together. Some people are in it and others are out of it. To some people the rules apply, to others they clearly don't. Some people have made a fortune out of it, others have lost their livelihood and in many cases even their lives themselves. So we are not all in this together. Mr. Johnson's own advisor, who was the one drawing up the process for us all to be in this together, was the person who disobeyed his own rules and went off to Durham and tried to cover it up and hide in the background, and has, so far it would seem, got away with it. The Home Secretary, who originates from elsewhere, has drawn up a series of principles with regard to the immigration of people from outside the country, particularly refugees, which are geared to keeping them out as much as possible, which rules would of course excluded her and her family had they applied at the time that she came into this country herself. We've heard this week of something called Project Big Picture. Project Big Picture is devised by some of the richer football clubs in the country who want to exclude others so that they can make more money. They have no concern for the lower league clubs where people are trying to make a humble livelihood, or for the development of the game, simply for the aggrandizement of their own pockets. And many of their players refused to take a cut in their very lavish wages during the time of lockdown. There were exceptions. There were people like Marcus Rashford, people like Jordan Henderson and Juan Mata, who have looked beyond themselves and realized how fortunate they are and their responsibilities to the rest of the community. But the general picture is one of more and more greed, so we are not in all this together. Our friend Mr. Jeff Bezos, if you don't know who he is in fact the richest man in the world and has become even richer these last few months because he is the founder and owner of Amazon. And Amazon, people like them, have made a fortune out of the lockdown, whereas humble shopkeepers and even small supermarkets have gone out of business because they can't compete, or people can't come in the way that they used to. And so we're not in this altogether. Some people are very much out of it. And billionaires are becoming more billionaires, and the poor are becoming poorer. The American election will be upon us. No doubt we will be thinking about it, or forced to think about it, how the American people have got to choose between two old men, one of whom in his democracy favours the abortion of unborn children, the other who in his plutocracy wishes to favour everything that is in his own interests and the interests of the few. It is quite a difficult choice. It's a shame that the American nation can't provide people of intelligence and energy to do something which is incredibly difficult and demanding. So we're not all in this together. I notice that our supermarkets are getting busier again, particularly the toilet roll department, because people are fearing that there may be a lockdown, so that primeval part of their lives which led to that behaviour back in March has now returned, and they're wanting to stockpile food so that they are not at a disadvantage, not thinking about other people at all. We are not in this altogether. And in the midst of that climate, Pope Francis has issued a document last week called Fratelli Tutti, which means all brothers. There were some politically correct people who criticised him for omitting the word sorelle, which means sisters, but he was in fact quoting the words of St. Francis, to the point that he went and signed this encyclical letter in Assisi itself, in the chapel where St. Francis said Mass. But the Pope's vision in this masterpiece is to show us that we are in this all together. We are all brothers and sisters, and that any policy or nation or race that works against that is destroying humanity itself. That is what he is trying to point out. He's trying to give us a sense of fraternity, even when we are being told that individual needs and ambitions and desires are the most important thing. This is where the gospel of Christ runs counter to modern life and always will. And when we look around and see what is happening, how many people are starving, how many people are having their rainforests taken away with the necessary oxygen they need to survive, how many people have suffered as a result of climate change, which is caused by ourselves. It is not a vagary. We have caused it through our own greed and our own behaviour. How many people have become refugees fleeing from violence and murder and not been made welcome anywhere, made to feel as if they are intruders. When we look at that, we can see that as a world, globally, we are not in this altogether. And yet Francis is saying we are all brothers and sisters. It's an easy thing to say, isn't it? When we come to Mass on a Sunday, we sometimes make an act of sorrow. I confess to Almighty God and to you, my brothers and sisters, that I have sinned. So who are our brothers and sisters? Is it just a fanciful, pious piece of sentiment, or is it real? The Pope is trying to show us that it is real, and that the whole of humanity, created by God, are brothers and sisters. In order for that to be accomplished, there has to be a huge change in people's mindset, both politically, racially, nationally, internationally, from the top to the bottom. We cannot spend billions of dollars and pounds on the means of destroying the planet. We cannot exclude anyone from our care and from our concern. We cannot simply seek our own wealth and our own aggrandizement if we are brothers and sisters. There must be no exploitation, no starvation, no deforestation, no refugees, no war. And charity is not a matter of choice, it is a matter of justice, that we share what we have and do not seek to protect and aggrandize ourselves nationally or individually for our own good. This is a huge, huge thing. But the future of the planet, the future of our world depends on it. And even within our church communities, how do we see our responsibility to each other? Especially now, there's that little thing creeping in where one or two people have contracted COVID. Are they to become sort of pariahs, to be avoided, to be dispensed with? Those children who, through no fault of their own or their parents, have contracted this condition, they can no longer go to school, and nor can the bubble in which they are in the classroom, even their own class. Are parents then blaming that child and that family for inadvertently developing COVID-19? Where are the brothers and sisters there? Where are the brothers and sisters in this town? It's amazing, isn't it, that many of the agencies that help people are not functioning. It makes me very sad that my dear friend, Major Carol Evans, is not able to run her community kitchen in the Salvation Army because of the COVID restrictions. And this is a time when the community kitchen is needed more than ever. And those other agencies, the Women's Refuge, the Lawrence House for homeless young people, and all the work that goes on in very many ways to help homeless people, in particular at this time of the year, to find shelter, particularly at night, cannot be. But we are brothers and sisters. Somehow we have got to get over this. Whatever we do is a risk. Whatever we do is a risk. Some of us, for the last 7 months, have been looking after Father Terry. Every day visiting him, feeding him, washing and dressing him. This afternoon, as you're looking at this, I will be dressing Father Terry for the very last time in his best white vestments for him to meet the Lord properly attired. And we've done this sometimes knowing that there was a risk, but he's our brother. So what can you do? He's our brother. And there is no choice when you see someone as your brother or your sister. There is no choice. And this is what Pope Francis is trying to show us. He will be criticized as he always is. He'll be vilified as he often is. But the Pope is the person above all others who is showing the world what not simply the gospel of Christ is, but what the gospel of humanity is. The gospel of people living together on the one planet. What he is trying to do is almost impossible. But what we cannot see is if that we continue with this process of self-aggrandizement, of turning a blind eye to those who through no fault of their own are living in poverty and hunger and homelessness, then our society will simply collapse. It will simply collapse. Civilization will come to its conclusion because we will have literally rubbed ourselves out in our selfishness. So the Pope's remarks are very timely. Something to read carefully and think about, but not just to say, well, that's a nice thing, Pope Francis. Oh, well done. Yeah, we all agree with that. it has to come down with each person, and what their priorities are as individuals, as families, and as a church family. What the infirmity of our dear brother, Father Terry, has taught us, and I will tell you again next week, is that when you love someone, you do what you do instinctively with no thought of thanks or gain. It is sufficient because that person is your brother or your sister. And I don't just mean in your own family, I mean your brother and your sister in the Lord, and your brother and sister in the world in which God has made for all of us to live in, happily, peacefully, and joyfully.